I decided for every 3 episodes I'm going to make an episode on a build. I call this one Spin to Live. Hey guys, just a reminder that this build is not in the end game. It's just a strong build I decided to showcase for you guys. I will talk about recommended passives and skills to take beyond the level of this current build. I'm going to be covering the pros and cons, the gear I'm currently using, and what stats I would recommend trying to get, the passives I selected, the skills I specialized in, and their trees. I'm also going to be talking about the rating of this build, which will scale off a damage rating and a safety rating. And of course, I'll be showing you some gameplay of how the build holds up against monster packs and boss fights. Just a little thing to mention for defense. If you're playing on hardcore or just want to play safe, try and stack health as a priority. Resistances are good, but don't prioritize resistances. Get them on top of health if you can, but health is overall better at the current state of the game. Now this applies to every build in last epoch. Now that we got that out of the way, sit back and enjoy the video. So the first thing I'm going to cover in this build are the pros and cons. Starting with the con. You gain most of your defenses while using Warpath. This is a bit of a con and a pro. On the con side of this is you have to be spinning in order to pretty much be unkillable. This build is also a little weak on the damage side of things, so your clear's a little slower. Ephemeral and Juggernaut stance currently do not have skill trees. This is just a con currently because I want to use these stances in the build. I just don't want to use anything else that I have access to. Also, another thing, you can do Ephemeral stance if you want more damage with your build, or you can do Juggernaut if you really don't want to die. Alright, now let's talk about the pros. There's a point in lunge that makes you unstoppable during the cast, and what that means is when you use the ability, everything that's coming your way or any mechanic mob has, you will evade everything and take 0 damage. High defenses while spinning. Like I said, this was a con and a pro. I would say it's more of a pro because the main point of the build is to spin. You only get that block chance while you're spinning. So because I have some block chance in my tree, it says 10%. When I'm spinning, that jumps to 30%. The build has mobile damage. And what I mean by that is you can spin while moving, which allows you to dodge mechanics very easily so that you don't take damage, which falls into the next pro. This build is very safe, very hardcore friendly. You have block chance with a 2-handed weapon. And the last pro is that you cannot be stunned while you're spinning. Let's talk about gear and what stats you want to aim for. First, I want to talk about what's required for the build to work. The only thing that's required is a 2-handed weapon. In terms of gear for damage, you want to get melee and physical damage modifiers. Attack speed is also very strong, allowing you to spin quicker with your Warpath. For defenses, obviously it's the same for pretty much every build. Just get a lot of health and armor, along with resistances if you can. Before I talk about the passives of this build, I want to go over my main ability, Warpath. Now this ability is a physical, melee, channeling, movement, strength ability. If we look into the Warpath tree, and I'll show you the points I'm currently in. So I'm level 15 in Warpath, but the points I have are the points you need for this build to work. Reckless Competent. Warpath deals more melee damage. This gives melee damage to 2-handed weapons. I would recommend you put 4 points into Reckless Competent, which gives you 60% melee damage, which then allows you to go into Scavenging Spin. While spinning, your melee attacks leech health if you're using a 2-handed weapon. This gives 9% to leech, which is a lot. It honestly is life-saving. you want to put 1 point into this ability. It just gives 50% area to your spin. Parrying spin. While spinning, you have a chance to block attacks and get additional block effectiveness if you're using a two-handed weapon. Pretty crazy. Block chance with the two-handed weapons, you get 20% block, and then you get 400 to block effectiveness. And then when you go down here, my next point will be into enduring deflection, which just gives you more block. Not even kidding though, all these points, it's pretty much like you got a shield, but dealing damage with a two-handed weapon, so you're kind of making up for the damage you'd be losing. From beyond this point, after getting this, you can put your other points in Dark Nexus if you never want to run out of mana, and you literally can just spam the fuck out of it. Or you can go into Iron Reach, which gives you increased area, which you put 3 points into this, and then you put a point into Warbringer. You can't move with Warbringer, but you have increased area by 100% and hit damage by 100%, and that is a fuck ton of damage. You could also go into Draining Assault. It costs more mana though, and you get more damage. And then you can go into this ability here, where your Warpath now pulls enemies. This point is also pretty good because it gives armor shred, but I'm trying to go onto a hardcore build of being safe. But this is pretty good too. It would just give you a lot more damage, just costs more. Before I go into my other abilities, I'm going to talk about my passives. Alright, so I put 5 points into Juggernaut, which gives 5 strength, 15% fire resistance, and 15% void resistance. And remember, your Warpath, you get 4% increased damage per point of strength. So getting strength is a very good point. When you're leveling up though, guys, so I would put 4 points into Juggernaut, put your 5th point into Fearless, and then I would go into Gladiator. You might not have the block on your two-handed weapon, but I mean, if you don't want to respec, it doesn't cost a lot to respec your talents. So you can build a little different, and then when you get the block, you can then respec to go into Gladiator. You put 5 points into this, and then I would go, eventually you would want to go 5 points into Armor Clad. It's very good, adds armor and reduces damage you take from nearby enemies, which then built into Iron Mastery. So you have a chance of casting Iron Mastery on kill or when hit. And what it does is it increases your damage and your armor by 40%. Now this point, the reason why I took this is because when you run out of mana, you then use Rive to get your mana, and it also gives health because of this. But this, I'm not even kidding, with one chain of this, because it's a combo ability, with 5 autos, you'll be back to full mana using Rive. And then you get Aegis of Renewal. You have a 25% chance to gain health whenever you block. Then you take Retaliation. You deal increased damage. This bonus is doubled if you have blocked a hit in the last 5 seconds. Normally you would go 20 points into Sentinel or like into your main class and then go into your second. But honestly, I really wanted Retaliation. Now, when you go into Forge Guard, you go 5 points into Battle Hardened. If you have been hit recently, you have a higher physical resistance and increased armor. So 15% to physical resistance and increased armor 30%. This build is just ridiculous against physical damage. I don't even think you can die from it, honestly. Like, especially, like, this is right now too. I'm going to show you all the points right to the top of the tree of what you would take, and yeah, no, you'd be immune to physical by the end of it. And if you keep up to date, like if you get all your resistances that you need to through your gear, I honestly feel like you'll be an unkillable machine. Mediocre damage, or maybe less. Now you put another 5 points into Steel Aegis. Gives block chance of 5% and 250 block effectiveness. Now I would go into Steel Aegis first, putting the 5 points. Then I would go into Battle Hardened for the other 5 points, because I love that block chance. Then you would go into Rallying Block. You have additional armor for each hit you have blocked recently. Armor on block is 45 and can stack to 10. Next point is Crushing Blows. Your melee attacks deal increased damage based on their mana cost. Increased damage per 1 mana cost, 0.5%. This is a very good point with Warpath, because for every 1 mana you are using with Warpath, you are gaining 0.5% damage, but that's also per point of allocation. You want to put 5 points into this, makes you tanky, and it honestly gives you a ton of damage. The next point you would get is so obvious. I looked at all three. Holy might, 150%. You're getting 1 strength and 2% health per point. You're putting 5 points into that, 150%. There is nothing else you would take. Not gonna lie guys, after when you take might, you're gonna have to bite the bullet here and put 1 point into flawless defender. It sucks. I don't know why this is block chance with shields. It should just be block chance. I hope they change that. But you're pretty much getting a useless level here, grabbing this. But it's because you're going to want this. You take less fire damage on block. This is really good. And you deal increased damage if you have blocked recently. Very good point. Increased damage if you block 10% per point. And then once you put 5 points into this, not gonna lie guys, I would put 3 more points into this. I would max this out. I would put another point in the might, maxing that ability too. And then I would put your final point. You could either, if you want, it's totally up to you guys, you can put it into Thornmail, or you can put it into Crushing Blows. You can even put it into Battle Hardened. Once you do that, you will then have access to the final row of passives. I would then go into Molded by the Forge, being designed for two-handed weapons. Now this one is where you're going to have to switch to a certain weapon depending on your playstyle. So if you're looking to get bleed chance, I maybe test them out and kind of see what's better, because like I'm not completely sure. So if you go into a mace, you get just straight up 15% more damage per point. If you go into a two-handed axe, you get 25% chance to bleed on hit. If you go into a sword, you get an increased melee attack speed of 5% per point. So it's totally up to you guys. Figure that one out. Test that shit around. The best part is that it's all in 1 point. So get a mace, you can then get an axe and a sword and test it all out without respecking any points. That's the beauty of it. And then I would also put a point into Avatar of War. And then that's all I could really say for the passives there. I mean, this is just amazing. You deal increased melee damage for each hit you have taken in the last 10 seconds. You know how fast that can stack up in this game? That's a very hard point to balance right there. Alright, now we're going to go into the rest of the abilities that I specialized in for this build. We're going to talk about Lunge, the gap closer for this build. So there are some points I would recommend you taking, and others are optional. I'm going to go over the recommended points for this skill first, and then I'll go over what I chose and what you could choose depending on your playstyle. Tactician is recommended. The ability basically costs no mana, and you get a 30% cooldown recovery speed. Amazing. It drops the fucking spell by, it basically drops it to a 2-second cooldown, which I honestly think is recommended. This point is also amazing. The only issue about it is the stun avoidance isn't that effective with the build. Not because you can't be stunned while you're spinning, but when you're not spinning, it's a decent point. You also do want to proc a few things after lunge before you start spinning. That is on the stronger mob packs. On the regular ones, it doesn't really matter, and I'll get into that later. I put 3 points into that just to have access to Unstoppable. Now Unstoppable is a beautiful ability. You take no damage while lunging. You just dodge a ton of shit. Like, honestly, it's a very good ability because when you're lunging, because you get all your block chance from your warpath, when you're lunging, all the projectiles and maybe even all the burns and poisons on the ground and whatnot will affect you. But if you have Unstoppable, you take nothing. No effect by anything, right to the target, and safe as fuck. Initiative is pretty good too. So for 4 seconds on using lunge, you get initiative. And what it does is it increases damage by 40% and increases crit chance by 40%. You're wondering why I didn't build into these points. For one, this gives you armor based on dexterity, and dexterity is not the stat you want to build. Strength is the stat that you want to build. And this point just gives you increased crit chance, and I personally do not give a shit about crit chance, if I'm being honest. And this point requires a pole arm, and I'm not using a pole arm in this build. Lunge deals more damage and has an increased chance to stun enemies. See, now this area right here, this whole area here, I would say is definitely totally up to you. This I wouldn't really recommend it, but it's kind of up to you. Rallying Blow though is pretty cool because you get health on stun, but you can easily just go up here and just get health just from using lunge, right? So totally up to you. You can use this getting an increased area and getting lunge or health from just using the ability. And you could also go into double strike, which gets an additional charge. It costs more. It loses damage, but you're able to spam the ability more. So that might speed up your speed clear. Honestly, that might be better than grabbing all of this. Who knows? This just gives you hit damage per armor. So, I mean, I'm building a lot of armor, so I thought that'd be a cool point to try out. I might switch over to this and give this a shot too at some point. But currently, this is what I'm running. Now let's go into my melee ability that costs no mana, Rive. Now, I recommend you go into Outburst, which is Rive's third strike deals damage in a larger area, and it deals 80% more damage. If you go into this ability, Rive's third strike leeches damage dealt as health. This point is very, very fucking good, just because of the passive point of Rive, where I'm already getting health from the ability. This on top of that makes you super tanky. Now this also builds into Brutality. Rive's third strike deals more damage, deals 30%, which then builds into the hot point. Rive's third strike instantly kills enemies below a health threshold of 15%. Amazing for boss clear. I also have a point into Massacre. Rive's third strike has a chance to detonate enemies. It kills, dealing fire damage to nearby enemies. This one's okay. I just kind of took it just because. Not really recommended. Coup de Grace, Brutality, Outburst, those I recommend. This point's pretty good too. I put 4 points actually into this to get 32% attack speed. This point is very good too. First and second strike have a chance to reduce armor. You have a 30% chance of doing that. So like you could always go into a fight and kind of spam that to get that off. And then you can kind of go into your warpath and get all your other shit off on the boss and whatnot, drop them low. You can reuse Rive to then execute them from 15% health. It also builds into this point. If you are above 75% health and have positive mana, Rive's first strike releases a wave of energy that deals 20 physical damage to enemies hit. So that's kind of a cool point. This changes the sequence of your strikes. Instead of going 1, 2, 3, it goes 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And 3 is the execute. I took this trying it out. It sounded really cool, and it is fun messing around with it. But again, like these 3 here, I would not recommend. I mean, you can do them if you want, kind of fuck around if you want, but I wouldn't recommend. This point actually though is pretty good. Rive's third strike deals more damage and hits in a larger area and has increased chance to stun enemies. But if you guys want to go for that, fucking full send that shit. So another thing you also can do is going to Overwhelm. The ability no longer lacerates, but the third strike hit damage 70%. Now we're going into the fourth ability, Forge Strike. Now I recently respected this, and I know I'm keeping this ability. I will talk about the recommended again, and then the optional stuff that you can do. I'm only level 7, but I have what I want to show you guys with this point. So if you go 2 points into Heavy Strike, stun chance on the ability and hit damage by 20%, which then builds into Forge Strike hits deal more damage against rare and boss enemies. See, this point is so good. Because the whole point of this now, this changes the build so much. So when you lunge in, you want to drop this, you want to then Rive, get a few hits off, and then you want to spin, because you get that armor shred off Rive, drop them low, reuse Rive, and then execute. That's how you get your damage off. It's cool mechanics that I kind of tried to tweak out and test to see if it works, and it does, trust me. The next point you go into here is Rending Descent. Forge Strike reduces enemy armor. This point I will max out because it stacks, and each point is 100 armor. So you can get up to 300 armor. Then you go into Reinforce Weapon. You put 2 points into this, And what this does is it just gives global melee physical damage. It's just flat, it just gives 10 to your damage. This, I would max out. As you see the tree right now, this is exactly what you want to do. You want to do 2 points into heavy strike, 1 point into Goliath strike, rending descent, 1 point, 2 points into reinforced weapon, 1 point into patient strike. And what this does, it adds a 3-second cooldown to the ability, but more physical damage of 30%. This is just a very good point. Another thing you can also do is if you can do reinforced armor. You have increased armor if you have casted Forge Strike. This is kind of, honestly, this point right here, kind of useless. It's not that good of a point. You cast at target, but it doesn't matter. The whole point is you want to lunge in on the target, so it really doesn't matter. This is a waste of a point, I would even say. I believe that leads you off with 5 more points. Okay, sorry guys, so no. Reinforced armor, you want to put 3 points into this, okay? Because you want to go into Strike Smash, you put 4 points into Strike Smash, which is increasing the area, and then you put 1 point into Anvil below. And what it does is it summons an Anvil on use, which then gives you 15 physical damage and increases stun chance by 100%. The last skill that I chose to use currently for this build is Ephemeral Stance. It's a toggle ability. While in Emperor Stance, you deal 70% increased physical and void damage, but lose 7% of your current health when you use a skill, and lose 37% more mana from mana drain effects. You can only have 1 stance active at once. Your abilities cost more mana when it's on, but honestly, it's really not that bad. That's the mana drain with the buff on. The health that I lose too is actually only when I first use the ability. As you see, I'm healing all my health back, so it's not that big of a deal. But if you really want to go safe, you can always use Juggernaut Stance. While in Juggernaut Stance, you have 50% more armor and take 15% less damage, but you have 15% less crit chance, movement speed, attack speed, and cast speed. That's just so many things that you lose that I don't even want to use it. I'm not gonna lie. 50% more armor and you take 15% less damage is crazy, but all the other modifiers that are gonna slow me down by a shit ton just turn me off with the entire ability. Maybe when they add a skill tree, you can then lower that debuff a little bit, but other than that, I am not using that ability. So now we're gonna go over the build rating. So in terms of safety, I would give this build a solid 9.5. In terms of damage, I would honestly give this build a 5.5. The overall rating I would put this build at is a 7.5. Alright guys, so now I'm going to show you some gameplay of the current build. As you can see, when I use Rive, I'm pretty much invulnerable. I was getting hit by everything, and if you look at my resistances, they are not high at all. Alright, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next episode.